Hey there, it's Carolyn Peters with another Cura Studios tutorial. Today I want to continue the Better Proportions series and introduce you to two new concepts: how to use big enveloping shapes and how to triangulate. In the last video, we already looked at proportions and we used alignments and negative spaces. And now I want to give you two extra tools to put into that proportion toolkit of yours. And those are those big enveloping shapes and triangulation. If you missed the previous video, I will put a link in the video description below, so be sure to check that out if you missed it so you have that as a foundation to work off of. So in the video right now, you see me lay in my blob phase, my gesture phase, just seeing where my items are at, using curves, keeping it very loose, and not obsessing over it. And the first measurement that I will look at is my largest enveloping shape of the entire arrangement. And to do this, I use my pencil, close one eye, and connect the outermost spots on the arrangement with each other. And like this, I create this random shape that I can very easily check in my drawing if it looks the same. So here it's kind of this oblong diamond shape. And I can, of course, also use this for smaller subgroupings. So I can do it for the entire group or the smaller groups within the setup. The rule of thumb you want to follow is you want to go from your biggest enveloping shape to gradually smaller enveloping shapes. It's kind of similar to what we talked about last week. You always want to go from the outermost to the incrementally smaller and more innermost shapes. So now I'm starting to triangulate. So with triangulating, you pick 3 random spots for an area that you're trying to figure out, and you connect them into a visual triangle. And for some reason, our brains are really geared for that. It's very easy for them to see if our triangle that we perceive on the setup is different from the triangle we have established on our page. And so if using negative spaces is a little bit tricky for you in the beginning, maybe trying to triangulate between 3 randomly chosen spots might be a better version. So here is another enveloping shape for a cluster. Here are the leaves and the lemon. And so I go in and out between using those enveloping shapes and finding 3 spots to triangulate between. And if you combine these two tools, you have a very good chance at getting excellent proportions. So here I go between the beak, the forehead, and the rim of the vase. There's really no limit as to which places you can choose to improve your placement. So here, forehead, tip of the leaf, and the crest of the bird's feather on top. And once I feel good about my triangle, then I can add those smaller sub breaks in the contour into the drawing. So I'm speeding this up again as I'm refining the shapes. So what you're seeing me do here is going from a very general outer shape to a slightly more specific shape where, for example, the leaves, I looked at the enveloping shape of the cluster, and then I took more time for every individual leaf and broke that down into a more precise shape. And I can do this, like I said last week, by looking at the leaf itself or at the shapes created in between the leaves or in between the leaf and the pedestal of the bird. Here I'm triangulating one more time between the forehead of the bird, the edge of the vase, and then that corner of the vase. And now that I'm happy with it, speeding the video up again for the refinement of the shapes. One more triangulation here. And again, these spaces can be so randomly chosen. So here I picked the stem, the next portion of the stem, and I try to figure out how high does it go to that end piece of the stem before it's just leaf. And as I was plotting this out using my triangle, I started to notice that the leaf above the lemon was misplaced. So, and you'll see me in a couple of seconds create some alignments, noticing that this leaf is too low. And to correct it, I zoom back out and go back to my biggest enveloping shape. Here, see that movement? So now I zoom back out, go my biggest enveloping shape right here, making sure that that is accurate. And so now I know that I have to solve my hiccup, my mistake within that area. So I'm taking out what I had laid in earlier, and I make an adjustment. So you never want to nurse along your mistakes. You want to make sure you have a good framework, and then you make your adjustments. And my framework was my big enveloping shape that I carefully observed. So now I feel confident about the adjustment that I made. And all throughout this drawing, I go in and out between refining my shapes and double checking yet another triangle, finding yet another enveloping shape. And so I said this earlier, you can create enveloping shapes for clusters or the entire arrangement, but of course you can envelop also just a single object. Like, what's the enveloping shape of just that bird sculpture? In the last few minutes of this video, you'll see me refining my shapes, going from these very general blocky lay-ins into refining the edges a little bit more, paying attention to where the edges change direction. So that's what you're looking at. And then at the very end, you'll see me reshift some of the leaves on the bottom right cluster, again, because I kept triangulating, I kept looking at the biggest enveloping shapes, and I noticed that something was slightly off, and I made an adjustment. So next time you draw and you think about this lesson and you want to use it for yourself, try to stay organized by going from the biggest to the smallest. And then you want to become really curious about the kind of shapes you're dealing with. Is it a triangle that's broad at the base? Is it leaning? Is it tilting? To what degree? Ask those kind of interrogative questions of your own drawing and the setup, and it will improve your drawings by so much, I promise you. So if you want even more tools to get better proportions, come back next week for the next video in this series, and I'll see you then. Bye!